we need to do is have a discussion about how your body versus your spirit body versus your soul works in terms of its pleasures.
Okay.
And one of those pleasures is your sexual pleasure.
Yeah.
Right? We need to have a discussion about all the influences that are upon these pleasures. So your body has been designed by God to have certain pleasures. So let's look at those pleasures. What are they? What brings you pleasure in your body?
Well, there's sexual organs.
So there's sexual organs, so there's sex, yeah.
Food.
Food, okay, yeah.
Exercise.
Exercise, yeah, brings you pleasure.
So movement, can we say movement?
So we can call it movement, but yeah, let's call it exercise, yeah.
Nothing else is coming to mind.
Nothing else comes to mind.
Oh, just give me a moment.
Well, that's a very fundamentally basic existence if it's just those three things, isn't it?
What gives me pleasure?
Sorry?
Is the question what gives me pleasure?
Yeah. Yeah, what brings actual...
In your body.
In your body.
Inside the body.
Pleasure.
There's a sense of love that I feel inside. The sense of peace, sense of joy that I feel inside.
Okay, so, but what causes it is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
See, if it's only those things that cause it, that's really interesting in a way, isn't it? Like, let's look at it. Let's look at it from a soul perspective. Here's my soul. So here's Billy's soul. Here's his body's spirit body, physical body, right? And the physical, this involves sensations, doesn't it? Or you could say senses.
Senses.
So you know how it's, we refer to as having 5 senses, but really, sex is like it's an interesting sense, isn't it? Because it involves not just sort of feelings, like it involves all sorts of things in your body, doesn't it? It's sort of quite strange, and it's the same when you get the sense of touch. Like sometimes you can be touched in one part of your body, and you're feeling it in other parts of your body where you're not getting touched. So what's happening there? There's all this referral in your nervous system to other parts of your body and so forth that goes on. None of these things are really considered very much. It's known medically, but most of us don't think, oh, this is all... There's much bigger things going on here than just 5 senses.
No, they're totally great.
Yeah. But let's look at the 5 senses. So food satisfies what senses?
But belly, the senses of hunger.
Well, no. Well, that's the underlying drive.
Right.
But it's not just hunger. Like you can smell you can be completely not hungry, smell a piece of fruit and go, I think I would like a bite. Can't you?
Yeah.
You can eat for enjoyment, not just for hunger.
So it's a desire. It's my desire for that.
Yeah. But what sense in your body? It's just
my physical.
You've got 5
senses.
senses.
Yeah,
Which ones?
The nose and the tongue.
So
taste,
that's a sense
taste.
of.
Taste.
What are the senses? Let's write them down.
Yeah. We got the
Taste. Yeah. Smell. What else?
touch.
Touch or feeling. Sensory feelings. So touch. Let's call it. Yeah. What else?
Your hearing.
Hearing and sight. They are generally referred to as our senses, aren't they?
That's right.
We see, hear, touch, smell, taste, right? Food, what senses?
Taste.
Taste, yes. What else?
Smell.
Taste and smell, yeah. Two senses. But what else?
Yeah.
Right. There are some foods you don't like eating not because of taste and smell, because of some other reason. The texture of it on your tongue.
That's sort of like the
and
touch part of it.
So that you could say that's also that, right? So it's got to satisfy, for it to be satisfying for you, it's got to satisfy those 3 senses at least, doesn't it? Right? Now, it's also interesting with fruit and stuff like that God's made, because you look at it and you go, oh, it just looks good too, doesn't it? Like, you got to admit. And, I know fruit, most of you can't hear the sound it makes, but it does actually make a sound. And you can hear it in your spirit body, but you can't, the frequencies are too different to your physical body for you to hear it there. But there are already 4 senses of your body, your physical senses in your body, that satisfy your desire to eat. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. So, that Anna. Let's look at sex.
There's definitely an extra sense, I think, involved with sex.
Well, yeah, but of these 5, which ones do they satisfy? Touch? I reckon all of them.
All of them.
Okay. So sex, all of them. Okay. Exercise, what does that satisfy?
All of them? No. The feeling of the touch that you're feeling inside, that you're feeling...
Well, I suppose it depends where you exercise. If you exercise with somebody yelling at you, saying, yeah, get onto it, blah, 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 and you need G'ing up, then that's not a nice environment, and you're not going to enjoy a lot of exercise that way. But I enjoy, when I'm exercising, what I see, what I hear, what I touch, and what I smell when I'm exercising. Does that make sense?
Because you're smelling like maybe you're running in the countryside and it just smells good.
Yeah, and you smell it, the different things. We've got different trees at home that give off a eucalyptus smell, you can smell that, and you've got different other trees that give off like a honey smell, and you can smell that, and you get all these different sensations while you're walking, plus your physical body feels good, and you feel like, that you're benefiting yourself, and also, look at a person who exercises and look at one who doesn't. Which one looks better?
You feel better because you can feel when you're getting overweight, for example.
Yeah. When you get overweight, you don't look good. You know that, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, of course you don't.
You don't feel good either in
Yeah,
your body,
don't feel
do
good
you?
either
You can
about
feel
yourself,
literally, physically, the pain
emotionally.
as well.
Or even physically.
But we're even just talking about the physical senses here. Already they don't feel good if you go to overweight, right? So, yeah. So here is so the point of what I'm trying to make with all that is, here is my physical body. It has physiological functions that are designed to bring me pleasure.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah, okay.
Of which these so-called senses are a part,
Right.
aren't they?
A part of the physical body, yeah.
Yeah. So here's my physical body. It's been specifically designed to bring me pleasure. And by the way, your spirit body also has been specifically designed to bring you pleasure in the spirit world. And it also has a superset, in other words, it has more senses that will bring you pleasure. If it doesn't, and in some places where it doesn't have more, it just has a greater scope. So in other words, sense of sight it still has, so you can still see in the spirit world, but you see more. You can see longer distances. Here, when you get on top of a mountain, you look over a whole mountain range, you'd be lucky, unless the mountains are like Mount Everest and you're looking all over, you're lucky to see like 50 kilometres. What's that for you, about 30 miles? In the spirit world, you can get on top of a mountainside and see 1,000. Right?
That's interesting. No?
Yeah, because your sense of sight has the ability to zoom in and out more, and also it's got a lot of different features that you don't have in your physical body. And the eye can't be designed, the physical body's eye can't be actually designed to have the same features.
Well, that's why we use telescopes and stuff like this.
That's right. That's why we design telescopes and microscopes and all these other things, because our eyesight can't have the ability to create those same sensations, right? But the design of those things came from the spirit world. People in the spirit world go, we could help them have that experience by helping them with the design of a telescope or helping them the design of a microscope. Or do you understand?
Right.
So a lot of inspiration comes from the spirit world, helping people come to the idea of, why don't you design a telescope?
I feel that way. Sometimes I'll make music and I'm like, this was not my...
Yeah. So we need to understand that actually a lot of the different tech that we've developed on Earth has been specifically gifted from the spirit world to help you to help you understand that these things are available to your body in the spirit form without you needing tech.
Without needing tech.
Yeah. Okay. So the spirit body has this superset of senses. Physical body has a set of senses. Now, in the Paget messages, when you read them, because most of you haven't, right? But when you read them, you will see that they are called your animal sensations. Now, why are they called your animal sensations? So this is referred to in the spirit world as the animal body. It's an animal. All right? An animal should indicate to you that it has no soul. This by itself, if it didn't have a soul attached to it, would have no soul, right?
Right.
Right. What determines whether you love or not?
My soul. Right.
Okay, so your soul determines whether you love, not your bodies. So if your soul drives the desires of your bodies, they are going to be in harmony with love, right?
Right.
If you're loving, they will be, the desires of the bodies will be harmonious with love. If your soul is injured in love, its injuries will drive the bodies. So the animal has a desire to procreate, and it's been designed to have a desire to procreate so that it procreates, right? That's necessary for the incarnation of new children to occur. That desire for sex is in the soul. It's not a flawed desire. So all these people who say to become a spiritual person you need to be celibate, that's not true, right? To become a spiritual person you need to bring the way in which you desire to satisfy your sexual desires into harmony with love.
That's exactly where I'm stuck with. I understand that.
Yep.
My desire for sex is actually what God designed, but my desire for...
Well, no, you've let it be what the animal desires.
Right, okay. That's where I'm struggling.
And by the animal, when we were talking about that in the Paget message, we're referring to the animal who's influenced by the temptations of the flesh. So when we said that line, the temptations of the flesh, in the Paget messages, right, we're referring to the temptations that the animal has where the soul doesn't have control. You follow?
I'm not following. I'm trying to, but I want to...
You're allowing the temptations of the flesh to dominate how your soul acts.
How is that possible?
Well, you let yourself sexually project, which is a desire for sexual interaction. It's an emotional and physical desire for sexual interaction, and you're letting it dominate you.
How can I change that?
Sorry?
How do I change that? How do I go?
Well, yet, if you say quiet enough, I can explain.
Sorry.
The problem, the reason why I'm pointing that out is that in the Paget messages, you'll read these lines which talk about the animal part of you and allowing the animal part of you to dominate. In the Paget messages, there's a whole series of messages about sin and what creates it. And a part of it is letting what you believe to be a need in your physical body dominate your soul eventually. And you do that because your soul is flawed in love. Because your soul sort of believes, I just need to, I become centric to my body. In other words, what I say is, what my body needs, I'm going to give it. Now, this is a common thing for men with sex. What my body needs, I'm going to give it, so I don't care who I have sex with, how many times I have sex, you know, what's going on with sex. As long as I get it, I'm happy. Right? Many men have that view. In fact, it's a common saying by men, well, men have that need. Many of you have even explained away bad behaviour from men by saying that men have that need. Right? Now, men have that so-called need for two reasons. One is the body has been designed for sexual pleasure, as has the spirit body, as has the soul. So inside of the design, there is a design that God wanted you to experience sexual pleasure. He did. So that's one reason why you have it. The other reason why you have the need that is out of harmony with love, in other words, evil, is because there's no love driving these desires. There's just the need. There's no assessment of what is loving versus what is unloving inside. Now, you want to think, and this is how most men are, they want to think that if it's not instinctual, most men blame it on instinct and just say it's men, that's the way we've been made. You know, women don't seem to need it as much. By the way, that's not actually true, but many women feel more injuries in different ways that cause them to feel like they don't need it as much. It's not actually true, but the problem with most men is we're going, I want it, so I should get it. I've been taught from childhood that I should get whatever I want. I'm more important than the woman. You've been taught that from childhood by your own mothers, actually, most of you. An example of that is your own mother brought you up, and let's say you're in a family where there's a girl and a boy. Did you have to do as much housework as the girl? No. There you go. You've been brought up to believe that men are superior.
My uncle saying you're going to inherit everything when I have a cousin who's older than me, and she was like blatantly would have been inherited everything if.
Sorry, I'm not following you.
Sorry, my uncle he was saying.
Can we not address your personal life too much? Yes. I'm trying to give you a structure for you to understand yourself in. Do you follow?
I follow.
Yeah. What you're trying to do is, a lot of my comments you will understand a connection to, and I'm trying to tailor it for you already anyway, based on my feelings, but you got to just be really careful of this self-indulgent thing, oh yeah, my experience was this and my experience was that. No, fundamentally there's a principle absent inside of your soul, a principle of love that's not there. You follow? When it comes to sex, when it comes to the temptations of the flesh. And then the allurements of the world nowadays offers you lots of ways, sinful ways, to address this temptation. Mm-hmm. Pornography it offers you. Many women are willing to have sex with you without love being involved, and you're willing to have sex without love being involved too. So the world offers you that as well. The world offers you the ability to live in a facade with women. In other words, make out you're a nice guy when really the principle of love inside of your soul is not there, and actually you're quite evil with the way you treat women. And it offers you this ability to present yourself as a nice person while, there's actually evil within. To falsify ourselves in our interactions with others, right? It offers us that potentiality as well. The world itself, the way the pleasures and the allurements of the world are operating is to feed your addictions. So when you have an addiction, that's why it feels so easy to satisfy them, because the world has been designed by everyone who came in advance of you for thousands of years. It's been designed to feed the addictions of the individual as much as possible, right? Okay, so this is why this paragraph is so important, because it's identifying so many problems that we face in our relationship with God. See, what fundamentally happens is we go, but I want these things. I want them. How can I get what I want and still be loving? No, the question is, really, I need to be loving, and then I will get what I really want.
That's exactly true.
Does that make sense? Most of us are going the other way. We're basically saying, how can I get what I want and still be loving? And this causes you to falsify your loves. And what I mean by that is to fake them. It causes you to make out that you're loving when you're not, right? But if your focus is, I want to be what God defines as love to be, and then whatever comes my way, and I always make the love decision first, then my whole behaviour and my whole life will change, and also I will dominate my sin rather than my sin dominating me.
So developing that desire to have God's principles inside of me.
Which are all based around love and truth, aren't they?
Yeah.
Yep. So in other words, I need to face the truth. One truth is, my mummy mummied me, and that turned me into this guy who thinks that women should mummy me.
Absolutely.
Right? That's a truth. That's also an injury. It's unloving for you to be mummied. There should be no demand on any woman around you to mummy you, whether they're a woman older than you or a partner of yours. And many men have children, and they get their children to mummy them as well, right? Or even their children, they get mummied by their children, right? Most men have been taught to have this sort of attitude. It's a huge sin that causes a lot of trouble on earth, right? And we've got to start seeing the principle, but we're not going to see the principle without receiving love. So the question is, how can I change it? By receiving more love. That's how you change it. By receiving more of God's love, you'll be able to see, wow, that's a big sin. Without receiving God's love, you're going to just think it continues on to be not a sin. But also, to receive God's love, you're going to have to see that it is a sin.
So,
but you don't at the moment.
if you think back to our conversation yesterday where we were talking about opening our heart, at the moment your heart is very closed on this issue. Your heart is like, no, I want to have sexual validation from women. I don't care if it's a spirit or a person on earth. I want that sexual validation, which is why the spirits come to you when you are quote unquote longing or trying to emulate prayer, let's say. Your primary desire is to have that validation, and that's why that attraction is happening. So the laws are operating to show you the issue, and as yet you don't have the desire to see it, one, as a sin, emotionally, to feel it as a sin. And so your heart remains closed.
I feel that pain right now. I think
No.
is that the pain? Is that not the pain?
No.
then?
No, you feel the pain of not having a relationship, not having sex.
Right. That's the pain then.
That's different to feeling the pain of this is a sin, what I want. What I want is a sin.
The way I want it,
Yeah.
not what you want.
Well, yeah.
I'm really trying to
Understand.
figure out.
Yeah,
What's
we'll
going
help.
on
We'll
here?
try to help. So what I've been saying, so let's get back to this discussion a bit, right? Because you need more information. So this body has its, you could call it its natural or instinctual desires. This body has its natural or instinctual desires. They've been created to have them, right? There's a whole heap of chemical processes, nervous system processes and everything in order to make them function and happen. And the information gets passed through the silver cord down the body stream to the next body and then to the soul. So you've got a cord here joining those two bodies together, and information gets passed, and then you've got a cord here connecting the bodies with the soul, and information gets passed so that your soul has an experience. That's how it works, right? But what happens is we become on earth very addicted to the experience without considering love. And that's what's happened for almost all of you with regard to all of your interactions. It's a natural process on earth for it to occur this way when you're not educated in love. And you think about it. How many of you went to school and learned about love? No? Nobody, right? Nobody even thought to teach you it, did they? Not a single person who you were taught by or educated by, up until you met me, nobody thought to teach you about how love works. Isn't that true?
That's absolutely true.
Yeah. Now, you look back at your childhood. When did your parents teach you about love?
They didn't. They thought it
Well, they sort of did, didn't they, by their behaviour?
did. It was very addictive behaviour.
That's right. Their own version of it, they acted in, and in the process of acting in it, they taught you act the same as me, pretty much. Or when they're yelling at you, don't act the same, whatever. They taught you a number of things, but they didn't teach you what love was because they personally weren't educated either. So the problem we've had on earth is that nobody for millennia, right, has taught about love. I was the first person on this earth to teach about love in the first century. But that was, before then there was 170,000 years of people and nobody taught anybody about love.
The Adam and Eve, they was in the same condition as you when...
Sorry?
Adam and Eve were in the same condition as you, but they
Yeah.
just made the choice...
But they decided not to learn about love from God, that God was the only person that could teach them.
Thank you. Sorry.
Thanks, Yura.
Thank you.
Yep. So we are all starting with you could say an impediment. Nobody has taught us about what love is. We've had to learn it from experience. And the trouble with most of our experiences is most of them were unloving in our childhood, right? Very few of them were loving. Well, you could say there was a mixture of love with a lot of unlove, and a love and a lot of unlove. And so this creates even more confusion. Like, What is loving? What isn't loving? I think that is loving, but I don't really know. And so you end up being an adult without understanding love at all. So what you're taught fundamentally by your parents is to satisfy the temptations of the flesh.
I was just about to say, this feeling for wanting pleasure,
Wanting?
wanting pleasure
Yep,
is what makes me believe I'm doing a loving thing for myself.
that's right. Yep. And most people only do what brings them pleasure because they think that that's loving themselves, right? And they don't consider the effect or negative effects that their desire for pleasure is having on everything else. In other words, they don't consider love. They don't consider loving others, the environment, God, each other, persons, even partners. There are very, very few of you actually love your partners, right? You're in addiction with your partners and therefore not loving them, right? To love your partner, you need to break the addiction and also get God's version of what love does with each other. That's what needs to happen. And that's not going to happen without education, but the majority of us have not been educated. So I'm not saying that you're bad people because you're terrible, you don't love. What I'm saying is it's a sad situation. You have not been educated.
No one has ever discovered God within themselves and
That's right.
the process you
We've
went through.
only ever taught on earth what other people have taught, and because what other people are taught is flawed versions of love, that's all we're going to get taught. And we're not even taught it. We just learn it through experience because there's no school saying, here's our flawed version of love, that's what you need to view, is there? There's no school even thinking of doing that. There's just like no discussion. You went to school, what, 5 years of age?
I think 5.
Yeah. Preschool, 4, is it? Something like that. Yeah. And when did you finish? About 18 or 17 or something like that
16.
before you went to university? You went to university, some of you went to university, you get up, what you're up to about 21 by now, is it? Yeah. When did somebody teach you about love in that entire time? All of your informative years, all of the years that were going to define the rest of your life. Not a single person thought to teach you about it.
We had religion. There was religion. You listen to that and you...
Yeah, what does religion teach you? It teaches you to say love, but it doesn't teach you about love.
Teaches you...
It teaches you what they think love is. It's just another construct of teaching you their version of it, right? You think about science, it does the same. It teaches you that version of it. Well, it's all survival of the fittest. We don't have to care about love. We just strive for the struggle of survival. That's that version of love. That's a very prevalent version now, isn't it, of love, the whole scientific process, right? Then you've got the religious view. I just follow these rules and you'll be loving, right?
It never works.
Never works, no. And most people who are religious, how do you feel in their company? Pretty unloved, right? Most of them lecture you, pester you, push you, rave on at you, right? Yeah. Without you even inviting them to, right? Many of them even knock on your door. It's like I used to do. Once I started receiving God's love again, I'm going, I can't do that anymore. It physically distressed me to do it because I knew I was impacting the will of others, therefore not being loving anymore. I didn't even think of it like that initially, and then I realised why. I realised, wow, what I've been doing, I was taught to do this up until I was 33 years of age, and I used to do it every week, for 3 days a week, and that entire time I was unloving. And I didn't even consider how I was just forcing my will on other people by doing it, right? That's how most religions are, aren't they? You go to a Muslim country, isn't it the same? What are they forcing the girls to do? Cover up, do this, do that. What are they forcing the men to do? 6 times a day, 5 times?
5 times a day.
5.
5?
Men and women.
Men and women. 5 times a day. You got to, it's
No
like you
alcohol.
can't talk to God constantly. You need a time of the day to do it, right? And these kind of teachings are forcing people into things, and therefore very unloving. And if you had any connection with God at all, you would feel how unloving it is, right? When you're there in these environments, like that's why when we're in Belgium and there's ding, ding, ding from the church bells in the entire, city, every hour from 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. at night, forcing the intention that we all use one of our senses to remind ourselves that they are holy. The people who are dinging the bell, right, are holy, right? Very out of harmony with love, right? Okay, so we've been taught from the time we were conceived through emotional experiences, and then after we were born through physical ones as well as emotional experiences, we've been taught everything else but love, right? That's been our experience. So this is why you need to not be so harsh on yourself about where you're at, right? Because at the end of the day, nobody's taught you. But now you have an opportunity to be taught. The key thing is, right, okay, who's going to do the teaching?
God.
Well, that's my opportunity. My opportunity is that God can teach me. And what I'm trying to share with you is how God does that. Make sense? So when we get back to this, we can see that firstly, because we haven't been taught about love, we have been totally focused, our entire focus of our entire life, probably up until this point, has been the equation, and we've talked about this many times before, the equation between pleasure and pain. What you do is you get as much pleasure as you can while at the same time to avoid as much pain as you can. And most people call that life. Right, so let's get back to things you enjoy. The things you enjoy, for most people, it is only those things. Everything else is hardly considered at all. For some people, there's other things, but they're all emotions, not physical senses. They're things like power. Some people enjoy that, right? And that's not based on senses anymore, is it? That's based on emotions, what they get from their power. You follow?
I follow.
Yep. So some people, they spend their entire life just working for money, so they enjoy money. They love money. Many of you love money more than you love people, right? If you're honest with yourself, when you've got an opportunity to help a person with your money, you go, I don't know whether I should. Right? Love would say, of course I should. It's how I help them that's going to matter, right? But I need to help them. If I got money to help and money could help, then help them with money. Yep. Many of us love money so much we want to accumulate it to the point that when we die we have millions of it. I remember people I met many, many times who had that's their whole goal in life was. When I became a property developer, that was almost becoming my goal. Just get more money, then I'll be able to do other good things. How many of you told yourself that? If I just get the right job and the right situation, the right money, then I will be able to help others. Now, if you love, you don't go, I'm going to wait until I love. You know what I mean?
Wow.
So already that's a flaw. It's a flaw. But this is where we go. So power, money, and other things. We'll talk about some other things as we go today, maybe. But these things are more emotional satisfactions that make me feel good. All based around what I measure to be my worth.
Are
right?
these blockages then to receiving God's love?
Of course, all of them are. That's why in the Paget message it says, turn me away from and overcome the temptations of the flesh and the influence of the powers of the evil ones who endeavour to turn my thoughts away from God to the pleasures and allurements of the world. Right? You have got so much pressure on you from spirits and from your own inclinations to turn to the pleasures of the world. You've been taught from a baby to turn to the pleasures of the world. Nobody taught you any different the entire time. Nobody taught you the disadvantages of that kind of life. Nobody's taught you what's wrong with it. They've only taught you what's right with it. Right? And they haven't taught you that actually you can have a lot of pleasure by doing things God's way. In fact, God designed you to have the most pleasure by doing things God's way. And they didn't tell you anything about the penalties that you experience physically, emotionally, sexually, and spiritually from doing things out of harmony with love. So let's be honest with ourselves about sexual pleasure. What pains are here now as a result of sexual pleasure, so-called?
STDs.
Right, STDs. Right. Any of you have had one?
Yep.
Right? You'll know they don't feel good.
Nope.
Yeah? Okay, so there's STDs. What else?
What are the other pains?
What are the other
Breakup.
pains? Sorry? Let's just maybe have the mics, eh? Mary can do it while I've got my back
so if we
turned.
go to
So we've got, what did I just say? STDs, yeah, sexually transmitted diseases, yep. Infidelity.
Yep, Rebecca. Bex. He's done it, yep. So then if we go to Charlotte. Mic runners, choose a side.
Choose a side, just let the
stand
mic
at the
come
back.
down.
And, yep.
Whoever's got their hand up.
So Charlotte here with her hand up in the white T-shirt.
Yep.
Abortions?
Abortion, yep. Mm-hmm. Is that because of sex?
Maxine.
Unwanted pregnancies, should we say?
Mm.
How many children are even born unwanted? And what do they feel when they're born unwanted? You know, we don't consider the cost of that, do we? You know, you're having sex, you're not thinking, there's a potential of having a child here, and if I don't want a child right now when I'm having sex, then, you know, what am I doing to prevent the conception? I'm thinking, I just want some pleasure. The average person, that's the way they think. So they're not thinking about how the child will feel when it's unwanted, let alone how it's going to feel when it's aborted. What else?
Maxine.
Child sexual abuse, rape.
Okay, yeah. So
sex trafficking.
having sex with people who don't really
want it
or are not even developed enough to understand it.
Yeah.
Yep. So what would we call that? Really, it is rape and abuse, isn't it?
Yeah.
This is all the results of focusing on the pleasure alone without having any love involved, right? What else?
We go to Tim.
Shame?
Shame, yeah. Why does the shame come?
Well, there can be two reasons.
Right.
One of them when you do something unloving or when you act unloving to someone else.
Okay, there's sort of like an internal conscience system, isn't there? That when you know you've done something and it feels really bad that you did it, there's the shame that comes from that. So you could call that guilt, right? In the sense that you did something wrong and you are guilty, that kind of statement. So there's guilt that comes from it as well. What else?
When someone rapes you or abuses you, you feel ashamed.
Correct. When you're on the receiving end of any kind of sexual abuse, and I'm not just talking about physical sexual abuse, I'm talking about even emotional sexual abuse. It causes people on the other end of it sometimes to feel like they are to blame for it. And in fact, the abusers frequently say to the abused, you are to blame. I did that because of you wanted it. That kind of thing. Oh, you really wanted to be strangled while we had sex. You really wanted to be, you know... Man, I can't think off the top of my head what.
You really wanted to have sex, you know? A lot of times abusers say you wanted to have sex when the person
it was
didn't.
really the abuser who did, that kind of thing. And so that causes the person on the receiving end of this abuse to feel ashamed, and often for the rest of their life, because they don't know how to deal with it, right? I was a member before I realised who I was a member of this group in Australia called the Adult Advocates of Childhood Abuse. In other words, it was a non-profit organisation that talked to people who had been abused sexually. And almost everybody I listened to the story of in that setting, and there were hundreds of people, by the way, who had stories to tell about that. Every single one of them didn't know how to deal with their shame. Every single one of them. They were still in their 40s, 50s, 60s, and some of it had been in that organisation for over 20 years, and they still felt as ashamed as the day the abuse occurred when they related their experience. That's how bad it is, right? So there's also, yes, the carried shame as the receiver of the abuse, yeah? Yep.
Yeah, Chris?
So we're talking about the negative effects of having sex without love.
A kind of perverted sex.
Yes, so things like
sadomasochism.
Sadomasochism. What's that called? S&M. Also, isn't there, for many, there's a distorted view of even who they are. Some people think they're gay when they're not. Some people think they're straight when they're not. Some people think, they're
bisexual.
They're bisexual, but a lot of it is because of different sexual experiences they've had during childhood and different projections they've had from parents and people in society that have caused them to believe that while they were growing up, right? So they don't even have a definite sense of their own sexuality as to what their attraction is, right? So these, you could say all of this is the penalty that society is experiencing, and there's a lot more, isn't there? All of this is the penalties that society is experiencing for not having loving sex. Does that make sense? That's the penalties. We're not measuring it. See, when we're in the state of just wanting pleasure, what we're doing is we're basically going, I just want my pleasure. I want it how I want it. There's certain things bring me pleasure and I want them how I want them. We're not saying, but what is the long-term effect of this desire on everybody, including me, everybody around me? What's the long-term effect?
We didn't even talk about in marriages where people are together, they're having sex, they don't love each other, and what impact that has on their children and what their children believe love is and what their children believe a good relationship is.
And the whole idea you've got to stay with someone you're not attracted to because you're married to them, all that, it causes all sorts of societal issues just because we're not loving when we would desire sex. If we were loving, none of those things would happen, actually. None of them. If you were loving, even the person you want to have sex with, you could feel she doesn't want to when there's certain times, or he doesn't want to, and you would not feel like even raising it. Right? If you were loving, you would be sensitive enough to know, yeah, I can feel not the right time.
Not like, you don't love me because you don't have sex with me.
And then have arguments about that. Yeah. You wouldn't even have the demand on the other person to satisfy your need, right? Very sadly, in the Bible, there's a scripture that says a wife's role, right, is to satisfy the needs of her husband. Who do you think wrote that?
Was it
God? Definitely not God, right? Definitely a man. Yep. Okay.
She added an adjective.
Sorry.
That's it.
What was the adjective?
A horny man.
A horny man. Right. Okay. Yeah. No, not a horny man. Like I'm horny plenty times, but I don't do that. Right. So yeah. Okay. What else?
And not experiencing love can be a negative compensation of this unloving sexual drive, not feeling love.
Loved. And needing sex as a way to feel like you're loved. Yep. So it even gets down now to, so now we're looking, so these were, these things here, those down to there, you could say, are sort of physical things, aren't they? That happen as a result of unloving sex. Here, there's a group of emotional things that happen as a result of unloving sex. There is, by the way, a whole heap of things that are sexual that happen because of unloving sex. And there's also a whole heap of things that are spiritual that happen because of unloving sex. Right? And we haven't even listed those. But when you get God's view of love, you know in your heart what they are. Right? Do you want an example? Okay. Spiritual thing that happens because of unloving sex. You believe your sexual needs are more important than your spiritual life. And so you'll sacrifice love for the sake of sex. That's a spiritual problem. Right? A person who loves does not sacrifice love for sex. In other words, they don't have sex with anyone they don't love. Right? And don't have sex with anyone they don't want to love forever. Just a thought. Then there's the sexual things that happen because of the love issue. Sexual things, emotional sexual things that happen. You start sort of, you get to see enough, like an example, porn. You get to see enough bodies that now every woman that you're comparing with some person you've seen. And you're comparing them physically with the person you've seen. And if they don't match your requirements physically, then you don't feel attracted. Now, one of those persons might be your soulmate, but it makes no difference to you, right? There's also the emotional part of that, which is like, I'm now willing to share my sexual energy with anyone. So that means when I've got an opportunity to share my sexual energy with anybody, someone down the road or whatever, someone who looks attractive or whatever, I'll do it without consideration of the long-term spiritual and emotional effects on the person or myself. Right? So they're all sexual and spiritual ramifications that are all hurtful. Because in the long term, what's going to happen is you get so numb to the specialness of sex that you start treating it like it's just a normal thing that you can demand from anyone. Right? It's a unique thing God's designed, particularly for the soulmate relationship. But we don't think of it that way. Right? So, there's a lot of problems, is what I'm saying. Principally, all of those problems boil down to one problem. I have not been taught to be loving when it comes to sex. And I have no idea what love is when it comes to sex. Now, that gets back to yesterday's conversation. Who's going to teach me to be loving about sex? Is anybody on earth going to teach you to be loving about sex? I mean in your day-to-day life. The average person doesn't even want to talk about sex, let alone teach you how to be loving about it, do they? Like, they're either embarrassed or they got their own stuff going on, or they've got, there's a lot of really weird emotions attached to sex as well. And the average person doesn't want to teach you anything about it. Or if they do, what do they want to teach you? Do it more with more people. That's what they want to teach you. Yeah, right. Do it more unlovingly. Let's it go through the tantric experience and do it more unlovingly is really what they want to teach you, right? And how many people in that environment do you see that are really happy? Their whole lives become driven by sex alone. And they don't hardly experience any pleasure unless it's sexual. Right? And this is because of all the spirits now get involved in it. You see, part of that verse said, part of that line said, and the influence of the powers of the evil ones who so constantly surround me. Why? Because they're trying to get the same feelings you're trying to get, and they're trying to get it through you because they can't get it where they are. Right? So not only do you have to contend with your own sin, but now because of your own sin, you're also contending with the sins of others influencing you through your own sin. Right? And this is where things go, right? Things get pretty heavy then. Can you feel how heavy you feel when I say how heavy they get, right? It's, oh, God. There's not only me and my feelings to contend with, but there's also the feelings of the people who surround you that you invite into your life, either spiritually or physically, that also you have to contend with this. You see, the average person on earth believes sex at any cost is fine, because pleasure at any cost is fine. So they believe that. And so that's where they're going to encourage you to go, right? And they don't see anything wrong with that. The average person doesn't see anything wrong with that because they themselves have never been educated in love either, to know that there's so many things wrong. And what I find very interesting, though, is nobody properly measures the cost, the negative, unloving cost, the painful cost. Nobody sees that cost as a direct result of the unloving act. They sort of see it as, it's a pity we've been designed that way, right? Pity we've been designed to get STDs. God must have made a flaw there. Maybe there is no God, because that does, doesn't make sense to me. Like, we should be able to have sex and pleasure whenever we want and not worry about STDs. And in fact, what is science doing now? Medical science is creating drugs so you don't have to worry about STDs. That's the purpose of these drugs, isn't it? So that you can continue having the same kind of unloving sex without needing to bear the consequence of it, the painful physical consequence of having it. Right? So our whole society is governed towards negating the effects that God created as a part of an unloving act into negating every one of those so there is no penalty. Right? But remember we said yesterday, how do I change my desire? There was two ways. One was by focusing on something that's desirous and pleasurable, and the other one was by measuring the pain. You see what we do with sex? It's almost like we become so, what's the word?
Detuned, desensitized?
No, where you're so in a frenzy about the pleasure.
Oh.
What's that?
Driven, obsessed.
Obsessed, obsessed about the pleasure, that you fundamentally say there is no pain from it. Internally, you're sort of going, there's no risk of pain here. So, one night stand, no risk of pain here. There's huge risks of pain in a one night stand. Huge risks.
I wouldn't even call them risks, I'd call them certainties of pain.
Probably certainties, yeah. Huge problems associated with it, but the average person is so obsessed with the need to have the sex that they completely detune from the actual consequences, spiritually, emotionally, sexually, and physically consequences. And this is the trouble with our addictions, is we don't face them. So this is the purpose of the prayer in this regard, is to try to help you face them. The way we stay in the shadow of God's love is to work through overcoming the temptations of our flesh, or you could call it our addictions, couldn't you? Work through our addictions and the influence of the powers of the evil ones. In other words, anybody around us who encourages to not be loving is evil. it's best to avoid them. Many of you purposely associate with them because you like them one way or the other, or they're nice, engaging people or whatever. Sometimes they've got very lovely personalities, it seems, but they're encouraging you towards evil. It's not good for you to associate with them while they're doing that, right? But many of us still continue to associate with them. In fact, we're drawn to them because there's certain things we probably admire about them and their life and so forth. And then you've got to remember that there's this constant pressure on you from the world and from the spirit world to sort of turn your thoughts and your feelings away from God to what the world has to offer you. And most of you are experiencing that every day, right? The pressures of that world. Yeah? You think about your day-to-day life. How many times do you think to pray versus how many times do you think to watch telly? Or how many times you think to pick up your mobile phone and look at it? Like most people are now picking up their mobile phone. It's like every... we've been going for walks in Gloucester. We're staying and going for walks. We do a 10k walk every day around about, and everybody's, looking at their mobile phone and not even looking at people anymore, right? Everybody. You go to a restaurant, what happens? You see families, a whole family at a restaurant. What is every member of the family doing? Scrolling their mobile phone, right? We are so addicted to those allurements that we're not considering even love of people and interacting with people and caring for people and all those things. We're just addicted. And the world is creating these more and more addictions so that you can be more and more distracted from yourself and from God. Philippa? Down the front.
Just on that topic, clearly something like pornography seems to be a huge problem in the world, and I just wonder what is driving that. Is that an intergender?
Yeah, a lot of unloving injuries, obviously. For women, a lot of it's about power. A lot of women involved in pornography want power over men, sexual power over men, and so they offer their bodies to be seen so they can get the feeling of sexual power over men. That's why people dance as strippers and things like that as well, because they want some kind of or some level of sexual power over men, right? And then on the other hand, the men want to, they have all sorts of emotions associated with it, don't they? Most of you men know what they are, don't you? Yeah, because many of you have them, right? There's all these, I want to see the woman's body. I want to fantasize about the woman's body. It brings me sexual pleasure to do that. I want to feel like she'll do a degraded act for me so that I can feel like I'm powerful over her and so forth. And a lot of the women fake the thing to get power. And many of you guys accept the fake rather than the real as well. There's so many emotions. It's like we could go on for days about them. But all unloving, right? And naturally, the consequences are all unloving. Yep. The men and women involved in all of these things are corrupted, emotionally corrupted. Yep. Now, the reality is too, when you become loving, you can look at porn and not have any feelings aside from, what's the sad thing that's going on there. There's many of our spirit friends in the celestial heavens who see and try to help the people involved in these kind of practices. They're not there to get some kind of personal pleasure out of it. They're there to help the person because they know the pain they're in. Yeah. But again, we very rarely see and even think about the pain. Frequently too, these kind of things where we're involved in pornography, the people involved in them are involved in drugs as well. And other things like trafficking, human trafficking, and all sorts of things start happening as well as a result of the demand, the unloving demand that men and women on earth, but a lot of men have about, their meeting their sexual pleasures. if we were truly honest with ourselves, we'd go, wow, that's a lot. Like, it really behooves me then, is that the right word? If that's an old word. Do you all know what that means? No? It puts a demand on me, right, to actually reconsider my own attitude and my own emotions, my unloving emotions about sex. When I analyse the actual results on earth, you know, we've got children like 12, 11 girls, little girls, 7, 8, 9, dressing provocatively now, aspiring to do that. We've got children sending their sexual photos of their sexual bits to other children, right? Because they can. We've got so many things going on now that, you know, and all because nobody's taught love about sex, right? And we've got all these things going on that are now going on, and because of the tech, it's all easier, right? A whole lot's easier. There's even AI porn now, right? Where the AI generates the porn, so you get the perfect. You can make a perfect body to look at, not any flaws at all. Exactly how you want it to look. How is that going to distort your relationships with that gender in the future? There's so many things you can do now that just feed the addictions. Every one of those things is stopping your relationship with love and your relationship with God. Yep.
And also lots of the influence on platforms like social media, which are the, you know, people that are with OnlyFans and these sorts of accounts.
What was that one? OnlyFans. Oh yeah, I heard about that the other day. Mary told me
which are
about
then influencing the younger generation to think that that's a normal aspiration to have to make money.
Money and power. A lot of people nowadays feel like if I have money, I have power. So how I earn my money, show all my bits to everybody, but make them pay. Make them pay. How is that distorting my own view of sexuality? It's a major destruction of it, isn't it? Yeah. Psychologically, it does like some very extreme things to a person's sexual part of themselves, to the soul. And this is why many, many people on earth have so much destruction and distortion about it, is because there's been so little education and no measuring. See, my feeling is that even if you just measured the bad results, you would have to pause, wouldn't you? But nobody does it. Like it's the same with, you know, we create plastics. We don't measure the bad results. We have this attitude to all sorts of things, sex included, where we just ignore the bad results and hope for the good. You know, do you think anybody who's having a one-night stand is hoping for a bad result or seeing that there might be a bad result? For the most part, no. They're just hoping for the good, hoping that something will come of it, something positive, even if it's just their own pleasure without any consequence. There's no measuring of pain going on. And so what's going to happen, and you can see this happening in the world, there's going to be more pain, and more pain and more pain and more pain, until collectively the world goes, we're sick of this pain. We're now measuring it because it's in our face and we can't avoid it. We're sick of it. We want to change it. In your personal life, the question I have for you is, when is that tipping point going to occur? Right? You can make it occur quite early, or you can wait until it's unbearable. Mm-hmm. You can do either. Yep. Perry?
And if we go to Rebecca at the back there.
And Rebecca's up.